The diner hummed with the cacophony of 100 different species conducting business over plates of exotic cuisine. Viridian Gate Station orbited a major trade nexus, and the Celestial Spoon had earned its reputation as neutral ground where deals were struck and alliances formed over carefully prepared meals. The establishment occupied 3 levels of the station's commercial ring, its transparisteel windows offering a breathtaking view of the shipping lanes where vessels of every conceivable design glided past like metallic fish in an endless ocean. Mira Chen wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of Calixian spice paste across her temple. The kitchen was a controlled chaos of hissing steam, bubbling pots, and the sharp commands of head chef Torvik, a 4-armed Brechnian whose culinary genius was matched only by his volcanic temper. Mira had worked here for 3 years, ever since her transport ship had suffered catastrophic engine failure and stranded her on the station with barely enough credits to survive a week. She had knocked on 17 establishment doors before the Celestial Spoon took a chance on a human with kitchen experience, but no formal galactic culinary credentials. The pay was minimal, the hours brutal, but it kept a roof over her head and food in her daughter's belly. That was all that mattered. Somewhere out in the dining area, little Zara was probably playing beneath the tables again. Mira had tried countless times to get her daughter to stay in the tiny apartment they shared in the station's lower residential sector, but childcare cost more than Mira earned in a month. The compromise was that Zara could stay in the restaurant's back office during Mira's shifts, with strict instructions not to bother the customers. Zara followed those instructions about as well as any 6-year-old could be expected to, which meant she followed them when it suited her and conveniently forgot them when something more interesting presented itself. The little girl was small for her age, with dark hair that her mother kept cut short for practicality and wide brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. Growing up in a space station melting pot had given her an unusual gift. While most human children her age were learning basic arithmetic and how to read in one language, Zara had picked up fragments of dozens of alien tongues, gestures, and symbols. She didn't understand what most of them meant, but she recognized patterns. She knew which hand gesture from a Threlkian meant friendly greeting and which meant mortal insult. She could spot the difference between a Cortesian merchant's honest smile and a lying one. Right now, she was wedged beneath table 17, her small body hidden by the long tablecloth, drawing pictures in the dust on the underside of the furniture with her finger. The conversation above her was boring. Something about shipping manifests and tariff negotiations between a Brechnian trader and a Xylothian bureaucrat. She had learned early that adults rarely looked down, and if she stayed quiet and still, she could remain invisible for hours. The entire restaurant seemed to shift when the Imperial Guard entered. Zara felt it first as vibrations through the floor. Heavy, synchronized footsteps that made the silverware on the tables tremble. Conversations died in waves as awareness spread through the dining area. She peeked out from under the tablecloth and saw boots. Not ordinary boots, but ceremonial armor plating that gleamed like captured starlight, each piece engraved with flowing script in a language she didn't recognize. There were 12 guards, moving in perfect formation, their weapons prominently displayed but not drawn. They took positions at every entrance and exit, their helmeted heads scanning the room with mechanical precision. Behind them came the stewards, 4 of them, wearing robes of deep purple trimmed with silver thread. They moved through the restaurant with practiced efficiency, checking tables, examining the kitchen entrance, speaking in low tones into communication devices embedded in their collars. The restaurant manager, a nervous Telvanni named Rishk, practically fell over himself, rushing forward, his 6 legs moving in an awkward scramble. His voice carried across the suddenly silent room, high-pitched with anxiety. "Welcome, your Imperial Magnificence. It is the greatest honor of this humble establishment to serve you. We have prepared our finest private dining chamber, if your radiance would be so gracious as to follow me." Zara knew enough about galactic hierarchy to understand that someone very important had just arrived. She scooted forward on her belly, moving like a little shadow beneath the tables, driven by the irresistible curiosity of childhood. She had seen wealthy merchants before, even a few planetary governors, but this felt different. The very air seemed heavier, charged with an authority that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Emperor Kylvros entered with the bearing of someone who had never doubted his right to command galaxies. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his species, the Ascari, having evolved on a high-gravity world that produced beings of exceptional physical presence. His skin held a faint crystalline quality, as if tiny diamonds had been pressed beneath the surface, and his eyes were a startling shade of silver that seemed to look through rather than at things. He wore armor that was somehow both functional and ceremonial, plates of an alloy that shifted colors subtly as he moved, from deep blue to purple to black. 2 personal attendants flanked him, and behind them came what Zara's young mind could only process as the most beautiful and terrifying woman she had ever seen. The woman's species was unknown to the child, but her bearing screamed nobility. She wore a gown that seemed to be made of liquid metal, flowing and rigid simultaneously, and her expression held the cold calculation of someone who viewed other beings as pieces on a game board. The Imperial party moved toward the private dining area, a section of the restaurant that could be sealed off with privacy shields for important guests. As they passed, every patron in the establishment either bowed or performed whatever gesture of respect their species demanded. Some even prostrated themselves fully on the floor. Zara watched it all from her hiding spot beneath table 22, her eyes wide. She had never seen people react this way to anyone. Even the Breshnian trader, who had been so loud and commanding minutes ago, was now pressed against his seat, head lowered, not daring to make eye contact as the Emperor passed. In the kitchen, Mira had no idea who had just entered her workplace. She was too focused on preparing a Deltarian coral stew that required precise timing and constant attention. Chef Torvik, however, had gone completely rigid when the Imperial steward appeared in the kitchen doorway. The Emperor Kylvros of the Ascari dynasty honors this establishment with his presence. You will prepare the celestial feast, 5th protocol, with all traditional accompaniments. Perfection is expected. Failure will result in consequences. The steward didn't elaborate on what those consequences might be. He didn't need to. Everyone in the kitchen understood that serving an emperor meant their lives were now balanced on the edge of a blade. One mistake, one moment of contamination or improper preparation, and they could all be executed for the insult. Torvik's 4 arms began moving with desperate precision, barking orders in 3 languages simultaneously. Mira found herself assigned to prepare the Zelan nectar reduction, a delicate sauce that would accompany the main protein. Her hands shook as she measured ingredients. She had made this sauce 100 times, but never with these stakes. "Where is my daughter?" she thought suddenly, panic cutting through her concentration. The restaurant is full of Imperial guards. If Zara is out there bothering customers, if she does something foolish. She couldn't leave her station. Chef Torvik would never allow it, not now. She could only pray that Zara had the sense to stay hidden and quiet until this was over. In the private dining area, Emperor Kylvros settled into a seat that had been hastily upgraded with cushions to accommodate his size. The privacy shields activated with a soft hum, creating a bubble of security that prevented sound from escaping and blocked all forms of surveillance. Inside this bubble, the Emperor could speak freely with his closest advisors without fear of espionage. Lady Thessa, the woman in the liquid metal gown, took a seat across from him. She was his chief political strategist, a brilliant mind hidden behind a beautiful face that most people never looked past. The Emperor valued her precisely because she was smarter than she appeared, and because she was ruthlessly honest even when that honesty was uncomfortable. The Xylothian Council is moving forward with their vote of no confidence. They believe you are too focused on military expansion and not enough on economic development. They have begun building alliances with the outer systems. Kylvros was silent for a moment, his silver eyes distant. He had ruled for 43 cycles, had expanded the Ascari dynasty from a single system to a dominion spanning 64 worlds. He had done so through a combination of military might and diplomatic cunning, but lately he felt the ground shifting beneath him. Old alliances were fracturing, new powers were emerging. The galaxy was entering a period of instability, and his throne was not as secure as it had once been. Let them vote. They will find that confidence or lack of it changes nothing. We hold the strategic trade routes. We control the fleet. They can posture all they want. But without military power, they are simply voices in an empty chamber. Lady Thessa inclined her head slightly. Your wisdom is evident, Your Radiance. However, there are whispers of more active resistance. There are those who would prefer a more permanent solution to their concerns about your leadership: assassination. She didn't say the word, but it hung in the air between them. Calvros had survived 7 attempts on his life during his reign. It came with the position. He had long ago accepted that someone was always plotting his death. My security is thorough. If someone wants to make an attempt, they will fail as all the others have failed. As if summoned by his words, servers began entering the private area carrying covered dishes. The celestial feast was an elaborate meal consisting of 17 courses, each one prepared according to ancient traditions that dated back to the founding of the Ascari dynasty. It was both a culinary experience and a ritual, each dish symbolizing an aspect of imperial authority and divine mandate. The servers moved with practiced precision, placing dishes in the correct order, removing covers with synchronized timing. The head server, a tall Vrenti with deep green skin, performed the traditional blessing in the old language, his voice resonating with formal cadence. Zara had followed the Imperial party at a careful distance, moving from table to table like a small ghost. She knew she shouldn't be here, knew that if her mother found out she was anywhere near these important people, she would be in serious trouble, but she couldn't help herself. The Emperor was like something from a story, and the guards with their shining armor and the lady with her dress that looked like liquid starlight, it was all too fascinating to resist. She found a spot near the privacy shield, close enough to see through the transparent barrier, but hopefully far enough away that no one would notice her. She watched as the servers brought out dish after dish, each one more elaborate than the last. Some of the foods glowed, others released small clouds of aromatic steam. One dish appeared to contain something that was still moving. The Emperor ate slowly, carefully, discussing matters of state between bites. Zara didn't understand most of what they were saying. The words were too big, the concepts too complex. But she watched the way people moved, the way the servers placed each dish with reverent care, the way the guards never relaxed their vigilance even for a moment. It was during the 14th course that she noticed something strange. One of the servers, a Cortasian male with pale orange skin, placed a dish before the Emperor with the same formal precision as all the others. But there was something different about his movements. They were correct, but they were too correct, too practiced. Like someone who had rehearsed an action many times to make sure they got it exactly right. Zara had seen that kind of movement before. Her mother moved like that when she was learning a new recipe, concentrating on each step, making sure she didn't make a mistake. It was the movement of someone thinking very hard about what they were doing. She watched as the Cortasian server stepped back, bowed, and exited the private area. The Emperor reached for the dish, a crystalline bowl containing what appeared to be a pale blue gelatin dotted with silver flakes. His hand moved toward the specialized utensil beside the bowl. That was when Zara saw them. Symbols. Tiny markings along the base of the bowl where it rested on the serving tray. They were barely visible, etched so finely that they looked like decorative patterns unless you knew what to look for. But Zara had seen those symbols before. Not exactly those ones, but similar markings. There was a Chirac trader who sometimes ate at the Celestial Spoon, always alone, always in the corner booth. He had symbols like that on his belongings. He had once caught Zara looking at his bag and had told her in broken common that the symbols were his name in the old tongue of his people. But these symbols were different. The basic shapes were the same, but they were arranged wrong. They were sharp where his had been curved. They felt wrong. They made her stomach hurt to look at them. She didn't know what they meant. She didn't even fully understand what she was seeing. But every instinct in her small body screamed that something was bad, something was dangerous, something was wrong. The Emperor's hand was inches from the utensil. In moments, he would begin eating whatever was in that bowl. Zara didn't know what would happen if he did, but the symbols scared her. They scared her more than the guards, more than the idea of getting in trouble, more than anything. She did what any 6-year-old child would do when faced with something terrifying. She reacted without thinking. She darted forward, her small body passing through the gap where the privacy shield met the floor, a space just large enough for a child to squeeze through. She ran across the private dining area, her worn shoes slapping against the polished floor, and threw herself forward, grabbing the Emperor's arm with both of her tiny hands. "Don't eat it," she cried out, her voice high and desperate. "Please don't eat it. The bad marks are on it." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The Emperor stared down at this small human child who had appeared from nowhere and was now clinging to his arm. Lady Thessa's eyes widened in shock. The guards, who had been caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of a child inside a secured area, began moving forward with weapons drawn. Hands grabbed Zara from behind. She was lifted off her feet, pulled away from the Emperor, her fingers losing their grip on his arm. A guard held her suspended in the air, his armored hand gripping the back of her shirt. "Security breach," one of the guards barked into his communication device. "Child infiltrator in the Imperial presence, requesting immediate Protocol 7. The head steward appeared within seconds, his face a mask of horror. He looked at the child, then at the Emperor, then back at the child. His mind was clearly racing through the implications. Somehow a child had penetrated Imperial security. Somehow a child had gotten close enough to touch the Emperor. Heads would roll for this. His head would almost certainly be among them. Zara was crying now, struggling in the guard's grip. "The bad marks," she kept saying. "The bad marks on the bowl. They're scary. They're wrong." The Emperor held up one hand, a gesture that instantly silenced everyone in the room. His silver eyes fixed on the child with an intensity that would have made grown warriors falter. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "Put her down." The guard hesitated for only a fraction of a second before obeying, setting Zara on her feet but keeping one hand on her shoulder to prevent her from moving. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, her small body shaking. Kael'vros leaned forward slightly, studying this tiny human who had just committed what could easily be considered an act of treason or assassination attempt, but he didn't see malice in her eyes. He saw fear. And beneath that fear, he saw something else. Certainty. This child believed absolutely that she was saving him from something. "What is your name, small one?" "Zara." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Zara Chen." "And what are these bad marks you speak of, Zara Chen?" She pointed at the bowl with a trembling finger. "On the bottom. The Chirac marks. But they're wrong. They're the wrong kind. They're the scary kind." Every person in the room went very still. The Chirac were a species known throughout the galaxy for three things: their skill as information brokers, their religious devotion to maintaining neutrality in all conflicts, and their language, which was notoriously complex and possessed multiple writing systems. The common writing system was used for trade and daily communication. But there was another system, an ancient one, used only by a particular subset of Chirac society, the assassin caste. Kael'vros looked at Lady Thessa. She was already moving, pulling a scanner from a hidden pocket in her gown. She passed it over the bowl, frowning at the readings. "The food is clean, Your Radiance. No toxins, no foreign substances, no—" She stopped. She had turned the bowl over to examine its base. There, barely visible even under close inspection, were the symbols Zara had seen. Lady Thessa's expression changed from confusion to horror. Chirac death script. The symbols are Chirac death script. They have been etched into the serving vessel itself. This is an assassination marker. The room exploded into controlled chaos. Guards flooded the area. The head steward was seized and dragged away, protesting his innocence. Servers were rounded up for questioning. The Cortesian who had delivered the final dish was nowhere to be found. A full lockdown of the restaurant was ordered. Through it all, Kael'vros sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the small human child who had just saved his life. She had stopped crying but still looked terrified, her eyes darting between all the armed guards and the chaos she had inadvertently caused. "How did you know what those symbols were?" The Emperor's question cut through the noise. Zara shook her head. "I don't know what they are. I just know they're wrong. There's a Chirac man who eats here sometimes. He has marks like that, but different. His are nice. These are scary. She couldn't explain it better than that. She didn't have the vocabulary to describe pattern recognition or the instinctive understanding that comes from growing up in a multilingual, multi-species environment. She just knew what she knew. Lady Thessa had knelt beside the child, her calculating gaze studying Zara with new interest. This child noticed a detail that our security scanners missed. She recognized a language system that most adults in the galaxy cannot even read, and she risked her own safety to warn you. She paused, then looked up at the Emperor. Who is she? The head steward, still in the grip of two guards, found his voice. She is the daughter of one of our kitchen staff. Her mother is the human woman, Mira Chen. The child is often in the restaurant. We have told the mother multiple times to keep her daughter out of the public areas, but bring me the mother. Now. In the kitchen, Mira Chen's world was falling apart. 2 Imperial guards had entered without warning, asking for her by name. Chef Torvik's expression had gone from angry to terrified in the span of a heartbeat. When Imperial guards asked for someone by name, it was rarely for a good reason. Mira's first thought was for Zara. Something had happened to Zara. Her daughter had done something, touched someone, bothered the wrong person. The scenarios cascaded through her mind, each one worse than the last. She barely registered the walk through the restaurant, her feet moving automatically while her mind raced with fear. They brought her to the private dining area. The privacy shields were down now, and she could see the assembled guards, the overturned table, the evidence collectors examining various dishes. And there, standing very small in the center of it all, was Zara. Mira's legs nearly gave out with relief. Her daughter was alive, unharmed, but that relief lasted only a moment before new terror set in. What had Zara done? Why was she here? Why were all these people? She saw the Emperor then, saw him looking at her daughter with an expression she couldn't read, saw the way everyone in the room seemed to be treating Zara not as a nuisance but as something else, something important. Your Radiance, Mira heard herself say, dropping to her knees as protocol demanded. I apologize with my entire being for whatever disturbance my daughter has caused. She is young and does not understand proper behavior. I take full responsibility for her actions. Please, punish me, not her. The Emperor studied this human woman kneeling before him. He could see the exhaustion in her face, the calluses on her hands, the stains on her work clothes. Here was a person who worked herself to exhaustion to provide for her child in a place that was not her home, among species that likely looked down on her, and yet her first action upon being brought before him was to beg for her child's safety. Rise. His tone was not unkind. Your daughter has committed no crime. In fact, she has performed a great service to the Empire. Mira looked up, confused. Service. She saved my life. Emperor Kylvros gestured to the bowl with its telltale markings. There was an assassination attempt concealed in this vessel. Your daughter noticed what trained security professionals did not. She warned me at great personal risk. She is either remarkably observant or remarkably foolish. Perhaps both. He stood, his full height making everyone else in the room seem small by comparison. He approached Zara, who stood very still, unsure if she was in trouble or not. The Emperor knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. When he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way that surprised everyone present. You were very brave, Zara Chen. You saw something wrong, and you acted to prevent harm even though you were afraid. That is the mark of a true warrior spirit. Zara blinked at him. Are you really an emperor? I am. Do emperors eat dessert? The question was so unexpected, so perfectly childlike in its priorities, that several people in the room nearly laughed before catching themselves. Even Kylvros's expression softened into something that might have been amusement. Yes, small one. Even emperors eat dessert. I helped my mom make a dessert earlier. It has cream and berries. It's really good. You should have that instead of the scary bowl. The Emperor stood, turning to face Lady Thessa and his head of security. Begin a full investigation. I want to know how an assassin gained access to this establishment, who hired them, and who in my court is working against me. And I want the Cortesian server found before he can report back to his handlers." He turned back to Mira and Zara. "As for you two, you will come with me. This restaurant is no longer safe, and anyone who attempted to kill me will not hesitate to eliminate witnesses." Mira's mind reeled. Go with him. Go with the Emperor. That was impossible. That was insane. She was a kitchen worker. She lived in a tiny apartment in the lower levels. People like her didn't go anywhere with people like him. "Your Radiance. I cannot possibly. We are just... You saved my life. Both of you are now under Imperial protection until we determine the full extent of this conspiracy. That is not a request." His tone made it clear that arguing would be pointless. Within minutes, Mira and Zara found themselves surrounded by Imperial guards, being escorted out of the Celestial Spoon while patrons watched in stunned silence. A small human child and her exhausted mother leaving under Imperial protection. It was the kind of story that would spread through Viridian Gate Station in hours and across multiple systems in days. As they boarded the Imperial transport, Zara looked back at the restaurant one last time. She had just wanted to help. She had just wanted to keep the nice Emperor man from eating something with scary marks on it. She had no idea that her small act of desperate kindness was about to change everything. The Imperial flagship Sovereign Dawn was a marvel of engineering that defied easy description. From the outside, it resembled a massive crystalline structure more than a traditional warship. Its hull composed of interlocking plates that shifted and realigned based on tactical needs. The vessel stretched nearly 2 miles from bow to stern and housed a crew of over 8,000, not counting the military contingent or the various diplomats, administrators, and courtiers who traveled with the Emperor. Mira Chen stood at the viewport of their assigned quarters, staring out at the infinite darkness of space, and wondered how her life had gone from cooking in a diner to standing aboard the most powerful ship in the known galaxy in the span of less than 6 hours. The quarters were larger than the entire apartment she and Zara had shared on Viridian Gate Station. The main living space alone could have fit 3 families comfortably. There were separate sleeping chambers, a bathroom with facilities she didn't fully understand how to operate, and what appeared to be a small kitchen area, though she suspected it was more for aesthetic purposes than actual cooking, since meals were probably delivered by staff. Everything was beautiful in a way that felt almost painful. The walls seemed to glow with a soft internal light. The furniture appeared to be grown rather than built, organic curves that adjusted to whoever sat on them. Even the air felt different here, cleaner somehow, filtered and temperature-controlled to perfection. Zara, who had been terrified during the transport from the station to the flagship, had recovered her spirits with the remarkable resilience of childhood. She was currently exploring every corner of the quarters with wide-eyed wonder, pressing buttons to see what they did and testing whether the furniture would support her climbing on it. "Mama, look, you can make the walls change colors." Zara had discovered a control panel and was cycling through various lighting options, turning their quarters from soft blue to warm amber to cool green in rapid succession. "Please don't break anything, sweetie. Everything here probably costs more than we could earn in 10 lifetimes." Before Zara could respond, there was a soft chime at the door. Mira froze. She didn't know the protocol here. Should she answer it? Wait for someone else to answer it? Was there someone else who was supposed to answer it? The door opened before she could make a decision, revealing a tall woman in elegant robes that marked her as someone of importance. She had 4 arms, pale blue skin, and eyes that held a calculating intelligence that made Mira instinctively cautious. "I am Lady Thessa, Chief Advisor to His Radiance Emperor, Kaelvros. I apologize for the abruptness of your relocation, but the situation required immediate action. May I enter?" It seemed like a formality since she was already halfway through the door, but Mira appreciated the gesture anyway. "Of course, Lady Thessa. Please." Lady Thessa glided into the room with practiced grace, her eyes taking in every detail, including Zara, who had stopped playing with the light controls and was now watching the visitor with intense curiosity. "I wanted to personally ensure that you and your daughter are comfortable and to explain the current situation." The assassination attempt at the Celestial Spoon was sophisticated and well-planned. The Cortesian server was not actually a server. He was a deep-cover operative who had been working at the establishment for 8 months, specifically waiting for an opportunity to get close to his radiance. 8 months. Mira felt sick. Someone had planned this for 8 months, had lived a false life for 8 months, all to get one chance to kill the Emperor. The Chirac death marks your daughter noticed were part of a traditional assassination protocol. The symbols themselves are harmless, but they indicate that the item they mark has been prepared by a Chirac assassin using methods that are extremely difficult to detect. In this case, the bowl itself was the weapon. It had been treated with a neural toxin that would have been absorbed through his radiance's skin upon contact. Death would have appeared to be a natural seizure. Even a full medical examination would likely have missed the true cause. Lady Thessa's gaze shifted to Zara, who was trying very hard to stand still and look grown up under the scrutiny of this important lady. Your daughter's recognition of those symbols saved the Emperor's life. We are still investigating how she was able to identify Chirac script, particularly the death variant, when most galactic scholars cannot. Mira felt defensive pride rise in her chest despite the strange circumstances. Zara is very observant. She has grown up around many different species and languages. She picks up patterns quickly. Indeed. Lady Thessa moved closer to Zara, kneeling down with surprising grace for someone so tall. Tell me, little one, what else can you recognize? If I showed you different writing systems, could you identify them? Zara thought about this seriously. Sometimes, not all the time. Some of them look the same but feel different, like how some people smile but their eyes don't smile. The letters can be like that too. It was a child's explanation, but it revealed something profound. Zara wasn't just memorizing symbols. She was reading context, intention, the subtle differences that separated friendly communication from hostile signaling. It was a form of emotional and cultural intelligence that couldn't easily be taught. Lady Thessa stood, turning back to Mira. The Emperor wishes to speak with both of you after the evening meal. In the meantime, you should know that there will be guards posted outside your quarters at all times. This is for your protection. The conspiracy that targeted his radiance may also target you as witnesses. The weight of their situation suddenly pressed down on Mira with crushing force. They were in danger. Real danger. Not the danger of struggling to pay rent or wondering where the next meal would come from, but the danger of powerful people who killed emperors deciding that a human cook and her 6-year-old daughter knew too much. Will we ever be able to go back to our normal lives? Lady Thessa's expression was not unkind, but it was honest. That depends on what we discover during the investigation. If the conspiracy is limited to a small group, it is possible. If it extends throughout the court and beyond, then your lives as you knew them are over. Either way, you are both under Imperial protection now. That protection comes with privileges, but also with expectations. She moved toward the door, then paused. The Emperor is not a man who forgets debts. You saved his life. That means something to him. More than you might realize. After Lady Thessa left, Mira sank onto one of the impossibly comfortable couches and tried to process everything. Zara climbed up beside her, sensing her mother's distress without fully understanding its source. Are we in trouble, Mama? No, sweetie, we're safe. We're just in a very complicated situation. Is the Emperor angry at me? No. I think he's grateful. What does grateful mean? It means he's happy you helped him. Zara thought about this. He seems nice. For an emperor. Mira couldn't help but smile despite everything. What do you know about emperors? They're in stories. They have crowns and big chairs and everyone has to do what they say. The assessment was simplistic, but not inaccurate. Mira pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, grounding herself in this one constant in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. The evening meal was delivered by staff who moved with such quiet efficiency that they seemed almost invisible. The food was beyond anything Mira had ever prepared or tasted, each dish a work of art that engaged all the senses. Zara was delighted by everything, particularly a dessert that created tiny holographic butterflies that danced above the plate before dissolving into sweet cream. After they had eaten and Mira had helped Zara wash and change into sleep clothes provided by the ship's staff, the summons came. The emperor requested their presence in his private study. The guards escorted them through corridors that seemed designed to inspire awe. Everywhere Mira looked, she saw evidence of wealth and power that exceeded imagination. Artworks from 100 worlds. Windows that showed not just space but tactical overlays of entire star systems. Officers and officials moving with purpose. Each one probably more important and powerful than anyone Mira had ever met in her previous life. They entered a chamber that was surprisingly modest compared to the grandiosity of the rest of the ship. This was clearly a working space rather than a ceremonial one. One wall was dominated by a massive holographic display showing what appeared to be organizational charts and relationship maps. Another wall held shelves filled with actual physical books, a rarity in an age of digital information. Emperor Kael'vros stood with his back to them, studying the holographic display. He wore simpler clothing now, still formal but without the ceremonial armor. Somehow, this made him seem more rather than less imposing. He turned as they entered, his silver eyes reflecting the blue light of the holograms. "Mira Chen. Zara Chen. Please sit." There were chairs arranged near a low table. Mira sat carefully, pulling Zara onto her lap despite the child's protests that she was big enough to sit in her own chair. "I wanted to speak with you both personally, away from the formal court protocols." The emperor settled into a chair across from them, and despite his size and authority, his posture suggested he was trying to appear less intimidating. "First, I want to thank you again, young Zara. Your bravery saved my life. That is not a debt I take lightly. You're welcome." Zara's voice was small but clear. "I'm sorry I grabbed your arm. I know I'm not supposed to touch important people without permission." A hint of amusement crossed the emperor's face. "In this case, I believe the rules can be overlooked. Tell me, how did you come to be in the restaurant today?" "Your mother works there, yes." Mira spoke up, her voice tight with residual fear. "Yes, Your Radiance. I work in the kitchen. I cannot afford childcare, so Zara stays with me during my shifts. She is supposed to remain in the back office, but children are curious. It is their nature." He looked at Zara. "You spend much time in this restaurant, observing the customers." "Yes." Zara had relaxed somewhat, responding to the emperor's surprisingly gentle tone. "People don't notice me because I'm small. I watch them and try to guess what they're saying even when I don't know their languages. Sometimes I can tell what they mean by how they move their hands or their faces, and you have seen Chirac customers before. There's a man who comes in sometimes. He always sits in the same spot and always eats alone. He has marks on his bag like the marks on the bowl, but his are different, prettier, not scary." The emperor exchanged a look with Lady Thessa, who had entered silently and now stood near the holographic display. "This is consistent with what we have discovered. There is indeed a Chirac information broker who frequents the Celestial Spoon. His name is Vexasharath, and he is known to us. He uses standard Chirac commercial script. The marks on the assassination bowl were in the death script, which is structurally similar but has specific variations that indicate violent intent." He turned his attention back to Zara. "The fact that you could distinguish between these variations, even without knowing what they meant, is remarkable. You have a gift, young one. A rare ability to see patterns and sense intentions." Zara didn't fully understand what he was saying, but she understood that it was important. Is it a good gift? It can be if properly developed and directed. Which brings me to the purpose of this conversation. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mira Chen, your daughter has rendered a great service to the Empire. By law and tradition, I am obligated to reward such service. Normally, this would take the form of a monetary payment and possibly a minor title. However, I find myself wanting to offer something different." Mira's heart was racing. She had no idea what an emperor's reward might entail, but she doubted it was something as simple as money and a title. "Your daughter has demonstrated abilities that are valuable. Intelligence gathering, pattern recognition, cultural sensitivity. These are skills that my court desperately needs, particularly now as we face threats both external and internal. I would like to offer Zara a position as a ward of the Imperial household. She would be educated in the finest schools, trained by the best instructors, and when she comes of age, offered a role in the intelligence services if she so chooses. The room seemed to tilt. Mira heard the words but couldn't quite process them. Ward of the Imperial household, education, training, a future beyond scrubbing pots in a space station diner. I understand this is a significant decision. The Emperor's voice was patient. You would, of course, accompany your daughter. I am not suggesting we separate you. You would both live here, on the Sovereign Dawn or at the Imperial Palace on Ascari Prime. You would be provided with quarters, income, and whatever you need to care for your daughter. In return, your daughter would be trained to serve the Empire. Mira's mind was reeling. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately. This was too much, too overwhelming. They didn't belong in this world of emperors and assassination attempts and political conspiracies. But another part of her, the part that had worked 16-hour shifts in kitchen heat for barely enough credits to survive, the part that had watched her brilliant daughter grow up in a cramped apartment with no real opportunities, that part wanted to say yes, so badly it hurt. Your Radiance, I am honored beyond words, but I must ask, what if Zara doesn't want this life? What if she grows up and wants to be something else? Would she be trapped? She would be trained, not enslaved. The distinction is important. If, when she reaches maturity, she chooses a different path, she would be free to do so. Though I suspect that once she experiences what education and opportunity can offer, she will find her own reasons to serve. He stood, moving to the holographic display. I am going to show you something that very few outside my inner circle know. He manipulated the controls, and the organizational chart changed, revealing a different structure. This is the reality of my court. Red marks indicate individuals I know are loyal. Blue marks indicate those who are probably loyal. Yellow marks indicate those whose loyalty is uncertain. And black marks indicate known traitors. Mira stared at the display. There were far too many yellow marks, and more than a few black ones. I have ruled for 43 cycles, and in that time, I have learned a painful truth. Power attracts those who hunger for it, and hunger erodes loyalty. Many of those who serve me do so because they seek advantage, not because they believe in the vision of the Empire. They smile and bow, and call me Radiance while plotting how to replace me with someone more amenable to their interests. He turned back to face them. Your daughter saved my life not because she hoped for reward or advantage. She saved me because she saw danger and responded with pure, instinctive compassion. That is rare, Mira Chen. That kind of fundamental decency is precious. I want to nurture it, not corrupt it. I want your daughter to grow up knowing that her value lies not in political maneuvering, but in her ability to see truth and act on it. Mira looked down at Zara, who was listening with the intense focus children sometimes display when they know something important is being decided. Her daughter's future was being offered on a platter, a future of education, opportunity, security. Everything Mira had dreamed of providing, but had never imagined possible. Can I think about it? Can I have time to discuss this with Zara and make sure she understands what it would mean? Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer will remain open. In the meantime, you are both guests of the Imperial household with all the protections and privileges that entails. After they left the Emperor's study and returned to their quarters, Mira sat with Zara on the enormous bed in the sleeping chamber and tried to explain the choice before them in terms a 6-year-old could understand. The Emperor wants to give you a chance to learn things, sweetie. Not just regular school things, but special things. Languages and how to understand people and how to help keep the Empire safe. But it would mean living here, on this ship or in a palace, instead of going back to our apartment on the station. Would you still be with me? Always. I would never leave you. Zara thought about this with the seriousness that only children can bring to life-changing decisions. Would I still get to play? Of course. You would still be a kid. You would just be a kid who was learning special things. Would I have to wear fancy dresses all the time? Mira couldn't help but smile. I don't think so. Maybe sometimes for special occasions. Zara nodded slowly. I liked helping the Emperor. I didn't like that people tried to hurt him. If I learned special things, could I help keep people safe? Yes, sweetie, that's exactly what you could do. Then I think we should say yes. Zara's logic was simple and pure. Because helping people is good. And Mama, you look so tired all the time. Maybe here you could rest more. The insight struck Mira like a physical blow. Her daughter had noticed, had seen the exhaustion and worry that Mira tried so hard to hide, had understood in her child's way that their old life was grinding her mother down. Oh, sweetie. Mira pulled Zara close, feeling tears start to flow. You are the smartest, kindest, most wonderful little person in the entire galaxy. They fell asleep together that night, mother and daughter, on a bed more comfortable than anything either had ever experienced, aboard a ship more powerful than 100 worlds, their lives balanced on the edge of transformation. In his private chambers, Emperor Kylvros reviewed the investigation reports that were beginning to come in. The conspiracy was larger than initially suspected. The Cortesian operative had been working with at least 3 members of the Imperial court, possibly more. The assassination attempt had been months in planning and involved resources that suggested backing from one of the major noble houses. What troubled him most was the sophistication. The Chirac death marks had been a deliberate choice, a signature. Whoever was behind this wanted him to know that they had access to the assassin caste, that they could strike at him using methods that were nearly impossible to prevent or trace. Lady Thessa entered without knocking, a privilege granted only to his closest advisors. The child's mother has agreed to accept your offer. They will remain as wards of the Imperial household. Good. Kylvros felt a satisfaction that went beyond mere strategic advantage. I meant what I said to her. The child has something rare. I want to protect it. You also see potential. Lady Thessa's tone was neutral, stating fact without judgment. A child raised in the Imperial household, trained from a young age, would be intensely loyal. The mother is grateful and dependent. They would serve you well. I will not make the child into a weapon, Thessa. No. You will make her into something more useful. An honest voice in a court of liars. A person who sees truth because she does not yet know how to see lies. That is more valuable than any weapon. The Emperor turned to look out the viewport at the stars beyond. When I was young, my father told me that the most dangerous enemies are not those who hate you, but those who smile while they sharpen their knives. I have spent my entire reign surrounded by smiling enemies. It will be refreshing to have at least 2 people nearby who do not know how to lie convincingly. Lady Thessa moved to stand beside him. The investigation has revealed something else. The Cortesian operative did not act alone. He had help from inside the restaurant. One of the other kitchen workers had been feeding information about your dining preferences and schedule to the conspirators. Mira Chen. No. Her work record is clean, and her reaction to events was genuine. It was one of the senior servers, a Telvanni male who disappeared shortly after the incident. We are tracking him now, so the mother and daughter are innocent of any involvement. Completely. In fact, had the mother been more vigilant about keeping her daughter confined, you would likely be dead right now. Sometimes fortune favors the undisciplined. The Emperor considered this. A child who should not have been there. A mother too poor to afford proper childcare. A moment of curiosity that should have been prevented but was not. And because of all these small failures of protocol, his life had been saved. Perhaps the universe has a sense of humor after all. Indeed. Lady Thessa paused, then added, The court will not react well to this. Humans elevated to the Imperial household. A child given privileges that noble families scheme for generations to obtain. You will face resistance. I have faced resistance my entire reign. This will be no different. This will be very different. You are taking a human, a species many in the court view as inferior, and raising her to a position of honor. You are making a statement about the value of merit over bloodline. Many will see it as a direct challenge to the established order. Good. Let them see it that way. Perhaps it is time the established order was challenged. He turned from the viewport, his expression hardening into the mask of imperial authority. I built this empire on the principle that ability matters more than origin. I will not abandon that principle now because it makes the nobility uncomfortable. As you command, Your Radiance. After Lady Thessa left, Kyle remained alone with his thoughts. He had ruled for decades, had made countless difficult decisions, had balanced competing interests and managed crises that would have destroyed lesser leaders. But he was tired. Tired of the constant vigilance, the endless suspicion, the knowledge that every smile might hide a blade. A child had saved him. Not one of his elite guards, not his sophisticated security systems, not his network of spies and informants. A small human girl who had noticed something wrong and acted without thought for her own safety. If that was not a sign that the Empire needed change, he did not know what would be. He composed a message to be sent to all department heads and court officials to be delivered in the morning. It was simple and direct. Mira Chen and her daughter Zara Chen are hereby declared wards of the Imperial household under my personal protection. Any action taken against them, any insult offered, any obstruction to their comfort or safety, will be considered an act of treason against my person. This decree is absolute and effective immediately. It would cause an uproar. There would be objections, protests, possibly even open defiance from some of the more arrogant noble families. But Kael'vros had not built an empire by avoiding controversy. Sometimes leadership meant making decisions that were right even when they were unpopular. He sealed the message and sent it, then retired to his sleeping chamber. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new complications. But tonight, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something like hope. A child had saved him. Perhaps that same child, given time and guidance, could help save the Empire itself. The Imperial decree hit the court like a seismic wave. Within hours of its distribution, the reaction spread through every level of the hierarchy, from the highest-ranking nobles to the lowest administrative clerks. The common sentiment could be summarized in a single question that echoed through 1,000 private conversations. Had the Emperor lost his mind? Lord Vax's Terran of House Venteris stood in his private chambers aboard his personal cruiser, reading the decree for the 5th time, each reading making his secondary hearts beat faster with rage. He was one of the most powerful nobles in the Empire, his family line stretching back 14 generations, his wealth encompassing 17 planets and their associated trade networks. And the Emperor had just elevated a human cook and her child to a status that put them under the same protection as the highest nobility. It was an insult. More than that, it was a statement. The Emperor was declaring that bloodline meant nothing, that centuries of careful breeding and alliance building counted for less than a single act of luck by some inferior species foundling. He activated his communication array and sent out a carefully coded message to the other members of what he privately thought of as the Council of Reality. These were the nobles who understood that the Emperor's idealistic nonsense about merit and ability was destroying the proper order of things. They were the ones who had quietly supported the assassination attempt, though none of them would ever admit it openly. The message was simple. The human child must be dealt with. Mira woke to the sound of soft chimes indicating an incoming message. She had barely slept, her mind too full of everything that had happened, every decision she had made, every possible consequence spinning through her thoughts in endless loops. She activated the message display, expecting perhaps instructions from Lady Thessa or information about their schedule. Instead, she found herself staring at an official Imperial communication that made her blood run cold. It was a formal notification that she and Zara had been declared wards of the Imperial household. The language was dense with legal terminology she barely understood, but the core message was clear. They were now under the Emperor's direct protection, which meant they were also now visible targets for anyone who opposed him. The implications crashed over her like a physical weight. By accepting the Emperor's offer, she had not just changed their circumstances. She had painted targets on both their backs. There was a soft knock at the door. Mira wrapped herself in the sleeping robe provided by the ship's staff and went to answer it, her heart pounding. A young woman stood in the corridor, human like Mira, with dark skin and intelligent eyes that assessed everything in a single glance. "Good morning, Miss Chen. My name is Kira Santos. I have been assigned as your personal liaison and advisor. May I come in?" Mira stepped aside, still processing the idea that she now had a personal liaison. Kira entered with practiced grace, carrying a data tablet and wearing clothing that was clearly expensive but practical rather than ostentatious. I imagine you have many questions. Kira's accent suggested she had grown up speaking multiple languages, her common tinged with traces of something else. Let me start by explaining my role. I am here to help you navigate Imperial protocols, understand court politics, and generally ensure that you and your daughter do not inadvertently cause or become victims of diplomatic incidents. Are there a lot of diplomatic incidents we might cause? Kira smiled, but it was not entirely a happy expression. You have been elevated to a position that many nobles spend their entire lives scheming to achieve. You did this by saving the Emperor's life, yes, but many will see you as upstarts who do not deserve their new status. Some will test you. Some will try to manipulate you. And some will try to remove you. Remove us. You mean kill us. Possibly. Or discredit you. Or find ways to make your life so miserable that you leave voluntarily. There are many strategies, and the court has had millennia to perfect them all. Mira felt dizzy. This is insane. We are just regular people. We don't know how to play these games. I know. That is both your greatest weakness and your greatest strength. Kira settled onto one of the elegant couches, gesturing for Mira to sit as well. The Emperor chose you precisely because you are not part of the existing power structures. You owe nothing to the noble houses. You have no hidden agendas or family obligations clouding your judgment. In a court full of calculating schemers, you are refreshingly straightforward. That makes it sound like we are going to be used. You are going to be used. Everyone at court is used. The question is whether you are used in ways that align with your own values and interests, or whether you become pawns in someone else's game. My job is to help you understand the difference. Zara emerged from the sleeping chamber, rubbing her eyes and dragging a stuffed animal that had appeared in their quarters at some point during the night. She climbed onto the couch beside her mother, still half asleep. "Good morning, little one." Kira's voice softened. "I am Kira. I am going to be helping you and your mother learn about your new home. Are you nice?" The directness of the question made Kira laugh. "I try to be, but sometimes being nice means telling people things they do not want to hear. Is that okay?" Zara considered this seriously. "My mama does that too. She tells me when I am wrong even though I do not like it. But then I learn, so it is good." "Exactly. You are a very smart little girl." Over the next several hours, Kira began what she called their crash course in Imperial survival. She explained the hierarchy of the court, which families held real power versus those who only held historical prestige. She described the various factions and their competing interests, the delicate balance of alliances that kept the empire functioning despite constant internal tensions. She also explained the practical matters, how to address different ranks of nobility, what clothing would be appropriate for various occasions, how to recognize when someone was being genuinely friendly versus when they were gathering information for later use. Mira's head was spinning by midday. The complexity of it all was overwhelming, like learning to speak 10 languages simultaneously while also studying advanced mathematics and trying to remember 1,000 people's names and titles. "I cannot do this." The words came out as a whisper, but they were heavy with despair. "I am a cook. I barely finished basic education. I do not know how to navigate this world." Kira's expression was sympathetic but firm. "You are a mother who worked 16-hour shifts in hostile environments to provide for her child. You learned to cook cuisine from species whose biology you do not share, following recipes in languages you could not read, satisfying customers who often treated you as inferior. You have been navigating hostile territory your entire life, Mira. This is just a different kind of kitchen." The perspective shift was startling. Mira had never thought of her struggles in those terms, but Kira was right. She had survived in environments where she was not wanted, had adapted to impossible circumstances, had protected her daughter against odds that should have crushed them both. "Also, you will not be doing this alone." Kira leaned forward, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone. "There are others at court who support the Emperor's vision of a merit-based empire. Not many, but enough. I will introduce you to them. You will build your own network, your own alliances. It will take time, but you will learn. Why are you helping us? Mira had to ask. You are human, but you clearly have experience at court. You have position and knowledge. Why take the risk of associating with controversial new arrivals? Because I was you once. Kira's eyes held old pain and hard-won wisdom. Not exactly, but close enough. I came to the Imperial court 12 years ago as a translator. I was good with languages, and the Empire needed someone who could handle negotiations with the Outer Rim species. I was treated as a useful tool at first, nothing more. But I proved myself valuable enough that they could not afford to discard me. I earned my place through competence and careful alliance building. Now I serve as a liaison between the Imperial household and various departments. I have influence, if not official rank. She looked at Zara, who had fallen asleep against her mother's side during the long conversation. Your daughter has the potential to be something extraordinary if she is given the right opportunities and protected from those who would use or destroy her. I want to help make that happen. The afternoon brought their first official court function. It was described as a minor reception, just a gathering of mid-level officials and their families to welcome new members to the Imperial household. Kira had explained that it would be a trial run, a chance for Mira and Zara to be observed and evaluated by people who were not powerful enough to be truly dangerous, but connected enough that their opinions would spread. The staff had provided appropriate clothing. For Mira, a dress that was elegant without being ostentatious, in a deep blue that Kira said would signal proper respect for the occasion without trying to overshadow higher-ranking attendees. For Zara, something simpler but still formal, designed to make her look like what she was, a child under Imperial protection, not a political player. The reception was held in one of the ship's many ceremonial spaces, a room with a vaulted ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the surrounding star field. There were perhaps 50 people in attendance, representing a dozen different species. Servers moved through the crowd with trays of refreshments. Conversation hummed at a level that suggested people were being carefully polite while intensely curious. Mira entered with Zara's hand firmly in her own, Kira walking slightly ahead to make introductions. Every eye in the room turned to watch them. Mira felt naked under that collective scrutiny, hyper-aware of every step, every breath, every tiny detail that might be judged and found wanting. The first people Kira introduced them to were a Brechnian couple, both scholars who worked in the Imperial archives. They were polite but distant, offering congratulations on their new position with the kind of warmth that suggested they had been instructed to be welcoming but had not actually decided whether that welcome was genuine. Then came a military officer, a scarred veteran who looked at Mira with open skepticism but surprised her by kneeling down to speak with Zara directly. I heard you saved the Emperor's life, little one. Is it true? Zara nodded seriously. The bowl had bad marks on it. You recognized the danger and acted. That is the mark of a soldier. The officer straightened, giving Mira a nod that suggested grudging respect. The child has courage. That counts for something. It went like that for nearly 2 hours. Some people were genuinely curious. Others were coldly polite. A few were openly skeptical. Their body language and tone making it clear they believed Mira and Zara did not belong in this world. Through it all, Kira stayed close, guiding them through the social minefield with quiet competence. It was near the end of the reception when the atmosphere in the room shifted. People moved aside as a new arrival entered, creating a space that suggested either respect or fear, possibly both. Lord Vaxiteran of House Venteris had decided to make an appearance. He was tall even by the standards of his species, the Krathen, with pale gray skin and eyes that held the cold calculation of a predator. His clothing was deliberately understated, which Mira had learned was actually a power move among the highest nobility. Only those secure in their status could afford to dress simply. Kira's hand on Mira's arm tightened in warning, but there was no way to avoid the encounter without causing a scene. Lord Vaxiteran approached with measured steps, his gaze moving from Mira to Zara and back again. So these are the Emperor's new pets. His voice was cultured, each word precisely articulated. A cook and her offspring, elevated to positions of honor. How remarkably progressive of his radiance. The insult was carefully constructed to be just subtle enough that open offense could be claimed to be a misunderstanding. Mira felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. But before she could formulate a response, Zara spoke up. "We are not pets. I am Zara, and this is my mama. We are people." The room had gone very quiet. Everyone was watching to see how Lord Vax's Terran would react to being corrected by a human child. For a moment, his expression remained neutral, unreadable. Then something like amusement crossed his face, though it was cold amusement, the kind that came from finding something unexpectedly entertaining. "Of course you are people. My apologies for the poor choice of words." He looked at Mira. "Tell me, Miss Chen, what does a cook know of imperial politics? What wisdom can you offer to the Emperor's counsels?" The question was designed to humiliate, to expose her ignorance in front of witnesses. Mira knew that anything she said would be wrong, claim knowledge she did not have, and she would be mocked as presumptuous. Admit ignorance, and she would be dismissed as worthless. But then she remembered what Kira had said. Her greatest strength was that she was not part of these games. "I know nothing of imperial politics, Lord Vax's Terran. I know about keeping people fed. I know about working hard and doing what must be done to protect those I love. If that is not the kind of wisdom the Empire needs, then perhaps I should not be here. But the Emperor seems to think otherwise, and I trust his judgment more than I trust my own doubts." It was not a perfect answer, but it was honest. And honesty, apparently, was unexpected enough to disrupt Lord Vax Terran's script. How refreshingly naive. He turned as if to leave, then paused and looked back at Zara. "Tell me, little one, what do you think makes someone qualified to serve the Empire?" Zara did not hesitate. "Being nice, and helping people, and trying to do what is right even when it is scary." The response was pure childlike simplicity, but it landed like a hammer in the sophisticated conversation. Several people in the room looked uncomfortable, as if they had been reminded of something they had long forgotten or deliberately ignored. Lord Vax's Terran studied Zara for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, a gesture that could have meant anything from acknowledgement to dismissal, and left the reception without another word. The moment he was gone, Mira felt her legs go weak with relief. She had survived her first direct encounter with imperial nobility, and while she was not naive enough to think it had gone well, at least it had not been a complete disaster. Kira leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. "That was well done. You did not try to match his sophistication or pretend to be something you are not. That authenticity is your armor. Do not lose it." As they left the reception and returned to their quarters, Mira felt the full weight of exhaustion crash over her. This was only the beginning. There would be hundreds more encounters like this, each one a test, each one an opportunity to fail or succeed in ways she barely understood. Zara fell asleep almost immediately, worn out by the stress of being observed and judged by so many strangers. Mira sat beside her daughter's bed, watching her sleep, and tried to convince herself that she had made the right choice. The door chime sounded softly. Mira considered not answering, but the display showed it was Lady Thessa. Refusing to see the Emperor's chief advisor seemed unwise. Lady Thessa entered with her usual grace, but her expression was more serious than it had been during their previous meeting. "I wanted to check on you after your first court function. How do you feel it went?" "I have no idea." Mira was too tired to be diplomatic. "Lord Vax Terran insulted us. I probably made a fool of myself. Zara was more composed than I was, which is terrifying considering she is 6. Lady Thessa settled onto the couch with the kind of elegant efficiency that suggested she never wasted movement. "Lord Vax's Terran was testing you. He wanted to see if you could be rattled, if you could be made to feel small. Your response was adequate. Not perfect, but adequate. And your daughter's response was extraordinary. She was just being herself." "Exactly." She spoke with the kind of moral clarity that adults have learned to complicate with qualifications and political considerations. It was disarming. Several people in that room were genuinely moved by what she said, even if they would never admit it publicly. Lady Thessa leaned forward, her forearms folding in a gesture that Mira had learned indicated serious intent. I need to be direct with you about something. Lord Vaxitaran is not simply a skeptical noble. He is dangerous. He is one of the most powerful men in the Empire, and he has significant influence with the military and economic sectors. He also believes that the Emperor's progressive policies are destroying the Empire's traditional foundations. You are saying he is part of the conspiracy that tried to kill the Emperor. I am saying that even if he was not directly involved, he certainly would have benefited from it. And he now sees you and your daughter as symbols of everything he opposes. You represent the idea that position should be earned rather than inherited, that ability matters more than bloodline. To him, you are an existential threat to the world order he believes in. Mira felt cold fear spreading through her chest. So what do? You survive. You learn. You become competent enough that even those who despise what you represent cannot afford to remove you. Lady Thessa stood, preparing to leave. The Emperor believes in you. I am beginning to believe in you as well. But belief is not enough. You must prove yourself worthy of the protection you have been given. After Lady Thessa left, Mira sat in the darkness of their quarters, listening to her daughter's soft breathing, and wondered if saving the Emperor's life had been the best or worst thing that had ever happened to them. In his private study, Emperor Kael'vros reviewed reports from the reception. Multiple sources had provided accounts of the encounter between Mira Chen and Lord Vaxitaran. The consensus was that it had been a preliminary skirmish in what would likely become a prolonged conflict. Lady Thessa appeared on his communication display, her holographic image sharp and clear despite the distance between their locations on the ship. Lord Vaxitaran is making his position clear. He wants everyone to know that he does not support your decision regarding the humans. Let him make his position clear. I have made mine equally obvious. Kael'vros studied the organizational charts that still displayed the loyalty status of his court. How many do you estimate will side with him in this? Perhaps a third of the court actively. Another third, passively. The remainder will wait to see which way the wind blows before committing. So I have perhaps a third of my own court that I can rely on. The Emperor's tone was dry. This is why assassination attempts keep happening. This is why we must be strategic. Lady Thessa's expression was calculating. The child is a symbol now. If she thrives, if she proves herself valuable, it validates your policies. If she fails, or worse, if she is harmed, it will be seen as evidence that your progressive vision is flawed. Then we must ensure she thrives. What does she need? Training, security, and most importantly, time. She is 6 years old. Whatever potential she has will take years to develop. You must be patient and protect her long enough for that potential to manifest. I can be patient. The question is whether my enemies can be patient, or whether they will attempt to eliminate the problem before it has a chance to grow. That is why we have increased security around the humans, and why I have assigned Kira Santos as their liaison. If anyone can teach them to survive court politics, she can. The Emperor nodded, accepting this assessment. Keep me informed of any developments. And make sure the child knows that she is valued, not as a political symbol, but as a person. She responded to kindness when she saved my life. I will not reward that kindness by turning her into a mere tool. As you command, your radiance. After the communication ended, Kael'vros returned his attention to the broader strategic situation. The assassination attempt had revealed fractures in his empire that went deeper than he had previously suspected. There were forces at work that wanted fundamental change, either his removal or a dramatic shift in how the empire was governed. The irony was that he also wanted change. He wanted an empire based on merit and competence rather than ancient bloodlines and corrupt privilege. But change was dangerous. It threatened those who benefited from the status quo and threatened people fought back with everything they had. A small human child had become the unlikely focal point of that conflict. She did not know it, could not possibly understand it, but her presence at court now represented the question that would define the next phase of the empire's evolution. Would ability and character be rewarded, or would the old hierarchies reassert themselves and crush this brief moment of possibility? The emperor had wagered his reputation and potentially his stability on the outcome. He had made a child into a symbol and a challenge. Now he had to ensure that both the child and the empire survived what came next. He composed another message, this one to his security chief. It was brief and absolute. Any threat to the Chen family was to be treated as a threat to his own person. Lethal force was authorized, no exceptions. It would not prevent all attempts, but it would make clear that anyone who moved against the humans would pay the highest price. Sometimes, the best defense was making sure your enemies understood the consequences of attack. In her bed, Zara Chen slept peacefully, unaware that she had become both a hope and a target for forces that spanned galaxies. She dreamed of butterflies made of light and an emperor who had kind eyes. In her dreams, everything was simple and safe. Reality would prove far more complicated. 3 months passed in a blur of learning, adapting, and surviving. Mira had never imagined that life could be simultaneously more comfortable and more stressful than her days working in the Celestial Spoon's kitchen. The physical labor was gone, replaced by the mental exhaustion of navigating court politics and protecting her daughter from threats that often came disguised as friendship. Zara had begun her education under a team of tutors selected personally by the Emperor. The curriculum was unlike anything offered in standard galactic schools. Languages, of course, with emphasis on the diplomatic and intelligence variants rather than just common trade speech. Cultural studies that went beyond surface-level tourist information to examine the underlying psychology and value systems of different species, pattern recognition exercises that built on her natural gifts, and most surprisingly, ethics classes that explored complex moral scenarios without clear right answers. The child thrived in ways that both delighted and terrified her mother. Zara absorbed information like a sponge, made connections between disparate concepts that impressed even her most experienced tutors, and asked questions that revealed a mind operating on multiple levels simultaneously. But she was still 6 years old. She still needed her mother's comfort when nightmares came. She still got frustrated when lessons were difficult. She still cried when other children were cruel, because other children were indeed cruel. The Imperial household included the offspring of various nobles and officials, children who had been raised to understand hierarchy and status from birth. To them, Zara was an outsider, an upstart who did not belong. Some ignored her, others mocked her openly. A few had been instructed by their parents to befriend her for strategic purposes, which was almost worse than the mockery, because the false friendship felt like a different kind of insult. Through it all, Kira Santos remained a constant presence and lifeline. She taught Mira the subtle languages of court, which gestures meant genuine respect versus performative courtesy, how to read the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed every interaction, when to speak, and when silence was more powerful than words. Today, Mira had been summoned to a formal meeting of the Household Council, a group of officials responsible for managing the day-to-day operations of the Imperial Court. It was her first official participation in court business beyond social functions, and the summons had arrived with no explanation of why her presence was required. Kira had helped her prepare, choosing clothing that projected competence without arrogance, reviewing the names and positions of everyone who would be present, coaching her on protocol and procedure. But no amount of preparation could fully calm the anxiety that hummed through Mira's nervous system as she entered the council chamber. The room was impressive in its purposeful intimidation. A long table of polished stone dominated the space, surrounded by chairs designed for various species' anatomies. The walls displayed real-time information feeds from across the empire, economic data, military deployments, diplomatic communications. It was a room where decisions affecting billions of lives were made with bureaucratic efficiency. Mira took her assigned seat near the middle of the table, acutely aware that she was the lowest-ranking person present. The other council members filed in with practiced precision, each one greeting colleagues and taking their positions. Lady Thessa entered last and sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Thank you all for attending." Lady Thessa's voice carried the authority of someone who had managed this body for years. "We have several items on today's agenda, but I want to begin with an update on the ongoing investigation into the assassination attempt against His Radiance." She activated a holographic display above the table, showing a complex network of connections between individuals and organizations. Mira recognized some of the names from her lessons with Kira, but many were unfamiliar. "We have confirmed that the Cortesian operative was not working alone. He was part of a cell that includes at least 7 other individuals, 3 of whom held positions within the Imperial household. All have been apprehended and are currently under interrogation. One of the council members, a Vrenthi admiral named Koreth, leaned forward. What about the financial trail? Someone funded this operation. Professional assassins and deep cover operatives require significant resources. We are still tracking the money, but preliminary analysis suggests it came through several shell corporations registered in the outer systems. The ultimate source is proving difficult to trace. Lady Thessa paused, her gaze sweeping the table. However, we have identified several noble houses that had both motive and opportunity to fund such an operation. House Venteris is among them. The name sent a chill through Mira. Lord Vaxitaran, the man who had so coldly insulted them at the reception, was potentially behind the attempt to kill the Emperor. And by extension, he now had reason to view Mira and Zara as witnesses and obstacles. We must be careful with such accusations. Another council member, a scholar named Delith, spoke carefully. House Venteris is powerful and well-connected. Without concrete proof, moving against them could destabilize the entire court, which is precisely why we are proceeding slowly and carefully. Lady Thessa's tone suggested she had anticipated this objection. However, we are monitoring all suspect houses closely. Any unusual activity will be investigated immediately. She shifted the holographic display, replacing the conspiracy network with something else, a detailed profile of Zara Chen, complete with educational assessments, psychological evaluations, and security reports. Which brings us to the second item on today's agenda. The Emperor has requested that we formalize the role of Zara Chen within the Imperial household. She has been with us for 3 months. Her tutors report exceptional progress. Her natural abilities are being refined and enhanced through structured education. The question is what specific position she should be prepared to fill. Mira felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She had not expected this discussion to happen in her presence, had not prepared any kind of statement or proposal. She could only sit and listen as people who barely knew her daughter discussed shaping her entire future. Admiral Koreth spoke first. The Military Intelligence Division could use someone with her pattern recognition skills. If she is as gifted as the reports suggest, she could be invaluable in analyzing enemy communications and tactical patterns. No. A new voice entered the conversation, cold and precise. Mira turned to see that Lord Vaxitaran had entered the chamber. She had not heard him arrive, had not noticed the door opening. He moved to an empty seat with deliberate grace and settled into it as if he had every right to be present. The child should not be weaponized. She is 6 years old. Assigning her to military intelligence would rob her of any semblance of normal childhood. The statement was so unexpected, coming from someone who had been nothing but hostile, that Mira could not immediately process it. Was Lord Vaxitaran actually defending Zara, or was this some kind of strategic maneuver she did not understand? Lady Thessa's expression revealed nothing. Lord Vaxitaran, your presence was not requested at this meeting, and yet, here I am. He folded his hands on the table, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. I have as much right to be concerned about the Emperor's decisions as anyone on this council. Perhaps more, given my family's long history of service to the throne. The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. This was a power play, Mira realized. Lord Vaxitaran was asserting his authority, reminding everyone that he could go where he pleased and involve himself in whatever business he chose. Very well. Lady Thessa's voice remained neutral. Since you are here, perhaps you would share your thoughts on the appropriate role for Zara Chen. My thoughts are simple. The child has been thrust into a situation she did not choose and cannot fully comprehend. Using her as a political symbol or intelligence asset before she is old enough to make informed decisions about her own life is exploitation, regardless of how we dress it up with talk of opportunity and merit. He turned his gaze directly on Mira, and she saw something in his eyes she had not expected. Genuine concern, though whether for Zara or for the principal he was defending, she could not tell. I propose that the child be allowed to continue her education without specific role assignment until she reaches the age of majority. Let her learn. Let her develop. Let her discover her own interests and capabilities. Then, and only then, should she be asked to choose how she wishes to serve the Empire, if at all. The proposal was so reasonable, so protective of Zara's autonomy, that Mira found herself agreeing before she could consider whether there was some hidden agenda behind it. But as she looked around the table, she saw that others were equally surprised by Lord Vax-Terran's position. Admiral Korath frowned. You would have us invest years of training and resources into someone who might ultimately choose not to serve? That seems inefficient. Efficiency is not the highest virtue. Lord Vax-Terran's tone took on an edge. The Empire was not built on efficiency. It was built on principles. One of those principles, at least in theory, is that individuals have the right to self-determination. If we violate that principle with this child, we validate every criticism that has been leveled against His Radiance's rule. Mira finally found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. What would you have her be trained for, then? If not for a specific role, what should her education focus on? Lord Vax-Terran turned to face her fully, and for the first time, his expression held something other than cold calculation. Everything. Train her in everything she shows aptitude for. Languages, culture, history, strategy, ethics, science. Make her broadly educated rather than narrowly specialized. A person with comprehensive knowledge and flexible thinking is more valuable than a person trained for only one function. He stood, preparing to leave as abruptly as he had arrived. I will draft a formal proposal for the Emperor's consideration. You are welcome to submit competing proposals if you disagree with my assessment. After he left, the council chamber remained silent for several long moments. Finally, Lady Thessa spoke, her voice carefully controlled. Well, that was unexpected. She looked at Mira. What do you think of his proposal? Mira took a breath, organizing thoughts that were still chaotic with surprise. I think he is right about one thing. Zara is 6. She saved the Emperor because she saw danger and wanted to help, not because she was trying to earn a position or start a career. If we turn her entire life into preparation for serving the Empire, we take away her childhood. And I think we take away part of what made her valuable in the first place. Her ability to see clearly because she has not yet learned to see through the lens of politics and strategy. She paused, then continued with more confidence. But I also think Lord Vax-Terran has his own reasons for making this proposal, reasons that have nothing to do with protecting my daughter. He sees her as a symbol of something he opposes. He wants to limit her impact by keeping her in a student role rather than giving her actual responsibilities. Lady Thessa nodded slowly. You are learning. Yes, Lord Vax-Terran's motives are complex. He may genuinely believe children should not be exploited. He may also be trying to neutralize a potential threat. Both can be true simultaneously. So what do? We consider all proposals fairly, including his, and we remember that the ultimate decision rests with the Emperor, who has shown considerable wisdom in his dealings with your daughter thus far. The meeting continued for another hour, covering various administrative matters that Mira barely understood. She contributed nothing more, content to observe and learn. When it finally ended, she felt drained in a way that was different from physical exhaustion, but no less real. Kira was waiting for her outside the council chamber. She fell into step beside Mira as they walked back toward the residential sections. I heard Lord Vax-Terran attended your meeting. That must have been interesting. That is one word for it. Mira's voice was tight with stress. He defended Zara. Or at least, he argued for protecting her from being used. I do not know if that makes him less dangerous or more dangerous. More dangerous. Kira's assessment was immediate and certain. When your enemies are predictably hostile, you know where you stand. When they start acting in ways that seem protective or reasonable, it means they are playing a longer game than you can see. They reached the quarters that Mira and Zara now called home. Inside, Zara was working on homework with one of her tutors, a patient Breshnian named Velkoth who specialized in xenolinguistics. She looked up as her mother entered, her face brightening immediately. Mama, look! I learned how to write my name in Chirac today. Both kinds of Chirac. She held up a data tablet showing two different scripts, one flowing and elegant, the other angular and harsh. Mira recognized them now, the common script and the death script. The sight of her 6-year-old daughter casually writing in the language of assassins made her feel dizzy. That is wonderful, sweetie. After you finish your lesson, we can talk about your day. After Velkoth left and Zara had changed into more comfortable clothes, they sat together on the enormous couch that still felt too large and too expensive for their use. Zara curled against her mother's side in the way she did when she needed comfort, but did not want to admit it. Some of the other kids were mean today. Zara's voice was small. They said I only get to be here because the Emperor feels sorry for me. They said I do not really belong, and eventually everyone will realize I am just a regular stupid human. Mira felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she kept her voice calm and gentle. Do you think you are stupid? No, I learn things fast. My tutors say I am smart. Then why does it matter what those other kids say? Zara thought about this. Because they have always been here. They know how things work. I am still learning. Maybe they are right and I do not belong. Let me tell you something. Mira shifted so she could look into her daughter's eyes. When I first started working at the restaurant, the other kitchen workers said I did not belong. They said humans could not cook properly for other species, that I would fail and be fired within a week. Do you know what I did? What? I proved them wrong. Not by arguing or fighting, but by working hard and learning everything I could. Eventually, even the ones who said I did not belong had to admit that I was good at my job. Not perfect, but good enough to earn my place. She tucked a strand of hair behind Zara's ear. You are here because you saved the Emperor's life. That is not something to feel sorry about or ashamed of. And you are staying here because you are learning and growing and becoming someone who can help people. That is valuable, Zara. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Zara nodded, but Mira could see the doubt still lurking in her eyes. Overcoming the internalized message that they did not belong would take more than one conversation. It would take time and repeated affirmation and proof through action. The door chime sounded. Mira checked the display and was surprised to see Emperor Kael'Vros himself standing in the corridor, alone except for 2 guards positioned at a discreet distance. She opened the door quickly, unsure of protocol when the Emperor showed up unannounced. Your Radiance, I was not expecting. I apologize for the intrusion. May I come in? I wanted to speak with you and Zara about the council meeting. Mira stepped aside, her heart racing. The Emperor entered their quarters with the kind of easy authority that suggested he was comfortable in any environment. He settled into a chair that adjusted automatically to his size and looked at Zara, who was staring at him with wide eyes. Hello, young one. How are your studies progressing? They are good. I am learning lots of things. Zara's natural honesty cut through any pretense, but some kids are mean about it. Yes, I have heard reports of that. The Emperor's expression was serious. I am sorry that you have experienced unkindness. It is not a reflection of your worth, but of their insecurity. He turned his attention to Mira. I wanted to discuss Lord Vax'Terran's proposal directly with you, without the formality of the council chamber. He makes valid points, even if his motivations are complex. I do not want your daughter to be used as a political tool or weapon. I want her to have a childhood, to develop naturally, to discover who she is beyond the circumstances that brought her to my attention. Mira felt something in her chest loosen slightly. That is all I want for her too, Your Radiance. However, we must also be realistic about the situation she is in. There are people who see her as a threat or a symbol they oppose. I can protect her physically, but I cannot protect her from the more subtle forms of attack, social isolation, psychological pressure, attempts to undermine her confidence or turn her against herself. He leaned forward, his silver eyes intense. That is why her education must include not just academic subjects, but also the psychological and emotional tools to withstand pressure. She must learn to trust her own judgment, to recognize manipulation, to distinguish between genuine criticism and malicious undermining. How do you teach that to a 6-year-old? Mira's question came from a place of genuine confusion. Carefully, gradually, with patience and consistent support. The Emperor glanced at Zara. I grew up in a palace full of people who wanted to use me or replace me. I learned early that the only way to survive was to know myself well enough that others could not tell me who I was. I want your daughter to have that same core of certainty about herself. Zara spoke up suddenly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did the people try to hurt you? You seem nice. The Emperor was silent for a moment, considering how to answer honestly without overwhelming a child's understanding. Some people believe that the way I lead the empire is wrong. They think that position and power should belong only to certain families, that things should stay the way they have always been. I believe that anyone who has ability and character should have opportunities, regardless of where they come from. That difference in belief makes some people so angry that they want to remove me. But you are the Emperor. Can you not just tell them what to do? I can command, yes, but commanding people does not change what they believe in their hearts. And if too many people believe I am wrong, even an emperor's commands become difficult to enforce. Zara thought about this with the seriousness she brought to all complex ideas. So you need people to agree with you, not just obey you. Exactly. You understand the difference between authority and legitimacy. That is a sophisticated concept. I do not know what legitimacy means. It means that people follow you because they believe you have the right to lead, not just because you have the power to punish them if they do not obey. Oh. Zara nodded. Like how I listen to Mama not because she will punish me, but because I know she wants what is best for me. Precisely. The Emperor smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually stern face. You are indeed a very smart little girl. After the Emperor left, Mira sat in the quiet of their quarters and tried to process everything. The most powerful man in the galaxy had just spent an hour in their home, discussing philosophy with a 6-year-old and treating them both with respect and consideration that seemed impossible given the vast difference in their positions. Kira had told her that the Emperor valued authenticity, that he was tired of people who only told him what they thought he wanted to hear. Maybe that was true. Maybe Mira and Zara's greatest asset really was their inability to be anything other than themselves. Over the following weeks, the dynamics at court began to shift in subtle ways. Lord Vex Terran had indeed submitted a formal proposal regarding Zara's education, and to everyone's surprise, the Emperor had largely accepted it. Zara would continue broad-based studies without specific role assignment until she reached age 16, at which point she would be given the choice of how to serve the Empire or whether to leave the Imperial household entirely. The announcement had generated mixed reactions. Some saw it as the Emperor showing weakness, allowing a hostile noble to dictate policy. Others saw it as wisdom, acknowledging that a child's value should not be predetermined by the circumstances of a single dramatic event. For Mira, it felt like breathing room. The pressure to have her daughter immediately prove herself worthy of her position eased somewhat. There was time now. Time for Zara to be a child while also learning and growing. Time for Mira herself to find her footing in this strange new world. But not everyone was pleased with the arrangement. Admiral Korath had wanted Zara tracked into military intelligence immediately. Several other officials had their own plans for how to utilize her abilities. These people did not openly oppose the Emperor's decision, but Mira could feel their resentment simmering beneath polite facades. And then there was the incident with Lady Sirath. Lady Sirath was the daughter of one of the most prestigious noble houses, a young woman in her early 20s who held a position in the diplomatic corps. She was beautiful, educated, sophisticated, and according to Kira's intelligence, deeply ambitious. She had also begun showing interest in befriending Mira, a development that immediately raised red flags. The friendship overtures started small, an invitation to join a social gathering, a compliment on Mira's choice of clothing, offers to introduce her to important people who could be useful allies. Each gesture was perfectly calibrated to seem generous without being overwhelming. Kira had warned Mira explicitly. Lady Sirath does nothing without a strategic purpose. If she is befriending you, it is because she believes you can be useful to her ambitions. Be polite, but be careful. Do not share anything personal or private. Do not agree to any favors or obligations. Mira had tried to follow that advice, but Lady Sarath was persistent and skilled at making her interests seem genuine. She asked about Zara's education, offered advice about navigating court politics, shared stories about her own struggles to prove herself in a male-dominated diplomatic service. She created the illusion of connection, of shared experience, of mutual understanding. It was during a private tea gathering that Lady Sarath finally revealed her true purpose. I wanted to speak with you about something delicate. Lady Sarath's voice was low and confidential, creating artificial intimacy. There are rumors circulating about your daughter. Some people are questioning whether she really recognized the Chirac death marks, or whether it was simply coincidence that she warned the Emperor. Mira felt ice spread through her veins. What kind of rumors? Nothing concrete, just whispers. You know how the court is. People talk. Lady Sarath leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. I am concerned that these rumors, if left unchallenged, could damage Zara's reputation and position. People might start to think the Emperor made a mistake in elevating you both. What are you suggesting? I think it would help if there were more evidence of Zara's abilities. Something public and dramatic that would silence the skeptics. Lady Sarath paused delicately. I have been invited to a diplomatic reception next week. Several foreign dignitaries will be present, including some from species with complex social protocols. If Zara were to attend and demonstrate her ability to navigate those protocols, to recognize cultural signals that others miss, it would be very impressive. Mira's instinct screamed warning. This was a setup. She did not know exactly how or why, but every fiber of her being told her that bringing Zara to this reception would be a mistake. I appreciate your concern, Lady Sarath, but Zara is 6 years old. Putting her on display at a diplomatic function seems inappropriate. Oh, I am not suggesting we put her on display. Just allow her to be present, to observe, to interact naturally. She is so charming and observant. I am certain she would shine. I will think about it. The conversation ended soon after, but Mira left feeling shaken. She went directly to Kira, who listened to the entire account with growing alarm. It is a trap. Absolutely and certainly a trap. Kira began pacing, her mind clearly racing through possibilities. Lady Sarath is working with someone, probably Lord Vax's Terran or one of his allies. They want to create a situation where Zara either fails publicly, which damages the Emperor's judgment in elevating her, or succeeds, but in a way that makes her seem threatening, which justifies moves against her. So what do? We tell Lady Thessa immediately, and we make sure Zara is nowhere near that reception. But the damage was already beginning. Over the next few days, the rumors Lady Sarath had mentioned began to spread more widely. People started openly questioning whether Zara had really saved the Emperor, or whether it had been an elaborate performance. Some suggested that Mira herself had planted her daughter in position to create the appearance of saving the Emperor, hoping for exactly the reward they had received. The accusations were absurd, but they did not need to be true to be effective. They just needed to spread doubt, to make people question the foundation of Mira and Zara's position at court. Zara felt the change in how people treated her. The mockery had turned colder, more pointed. Other children who had been merely distant now actively avoided her. Some adults who had been cautiously polite now looked at her with open skepticism. It came to a head during one of Zara's lessons. She was working with a group of other children on a cultural analysis exercise, examining recorded interactions between diplomats from different species and identifying points of miscommunication. Zara had spotted several subtle signals that the other children had missed, corrections that her tutor had praised. One of the other students, a Krathan boy named Vex, who was the son of a prominent military commander, had sneered at her. Of course you claim to see things the rest of us miss. That is your whole act, is it not? Pretending to be special so the Emperor will keep you around. I am not pretending. Zara's voice had been quiet but firm. I just notice things, then prove it. Show us something right now that the rest of us cannot see. Go ahead. Prove you are as special as everyone claims. Zara had looked at him, really looked, using the observational skills she had been developing. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes, the way he held himself as if bracing for impact. She saw fear masquerading as aggression. "You are scared." She said it simply, stating an observation without malice. Someone important is angry at you, maybe your father, and you are worried about disappointing him. So you are trying to make someone else feel small so you do not feel so small yourself. The room had gone silent. Vex's face had cycled through several expressions: shock, rage, humiliation, before he had stood up and stormed out. The tutor had struggled to restore order to the lesson. That evening, Mira received a formal complaint from Vex's father, demanding an apology for his son's public humiliation. The complaint had been copied to half the court, ensuring maximum visibility. Kira had reviewed the incident report and the recordings from the classroom. "Your daughter was accurate in her assessment. The boy has been struggling with performance anxiety related to his father's expectations. Everything Zara said was true. That does not matter." Mira felt exhausted. The truth does not matter. What matters is that we are now seen as people who use a child to verbally attack other children. We are seen as vindictive and inappropriate. Yes. Kira's agreement was blunt. "This is what I warned you about. They are creating a narrative in which you are the villains." Every true thing Zara says, every accurate observation, will be twisted into evidence that she is manipulative or cruel. Mira sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of impossibility crushing down on her. We cannot win. If Zara demonstrates her abilities, she is showing off or being cruel. If she does not, she is a fraud. There is no path forward that does not lead to our destruction. There is one path. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Both women turned to see Emperor Kyle standing there, having entered so quietly that neither had heard him. His expression was harder than Mira had ever seen it. "The path forward is that we stop playing defense and go on offense. I have tolerated these attacks on you and your daughter because I wanted to give my court time to adjust, to accept the changes I am implementing. But I see now that patience is being interpreted as weakness." He moved into the room with decisive purpose. "Tomorrow there will be a formal court assembly. All major nobles and officials will be required to attend. And at that assembly, I am going to make something absolutely clear. Mira Chen and Zara Chen are under my personal protection, and anyone who moves against them answers to me directly. Your radiance that will force a confrontation." Lady Thessa had appeared behind him, clearly having accompanied him. "It will make the conflict explicit rather than allowing it to remain in shadows." "Good. I am tired of shadow wars. Let us have clarity. Those who support my vision for the Empire can stand with me. Those who oppose it can declare themselves openly, and then we will see who has the courage to act on their convictions." He looked at Mira, and she saw in his eyes the same quality that had made him an emperor, the ability to make hard choices and accept their consequences. "You saved my life, Mira Chen. Now I am going to save yours. Tomorrow, everything changes." The Grand Assembly Hall of the Sovereign Dawn was a space designed to inspire awe and reinforce hierarchy. The chamber stretched 3 stories high, its walls lined with the banners of every noble house that had sworn fealty to the Ascari dynasty. At the far end, elevated on a platform that required climbing 7 ceremonial steps, stood the Emperor's throne, a massive construction of crystalline alloy that seemed to capture and refract light in ways that made the occupant appear almost divine. Mira had never been in this space before. The sheer scale of it made her feel impossibly small. Hundreds of nobles, officials, military commanders, and diplomats were filing in, taking their assigned positions according to a protocol so complex that it had required Kira to spend 2 hours explaining where Mira and Zara would stand and what their presence in that specific location meant to the court's power structure. They were positioned in the front section, close to the throne but slightly to the right. According to Kira, this placement was deliberately significant. It indicated that they were under direct Imperial protection, but not part of the traditional power structure. They were, in effect, the Emperor's personal guests, rather than members of the established hierarchy. Zara stood beside her mother, wearing a formal dress that was beautiful but practical enough for a child to move in. She looked very small and very serious, her hand gripping Mira's tightly. She understood that something important was about to happen, even if she could not fully comprehend the political implications. Kira stood just behind them, a subtle but clear indication that they had allies and support. Across the chamber, Mira could see Lord Vax Terran and his considerable entourage occupying the most prestigious position among the noble houses. He looked calm and composed, but Mira had learned enough about court politics to recognize that his presence here, at an assembly called on short notice, meant he knew exactly what was coming and had prepared for it. The chamber fell silent as Emperor Kael'vros entered. He wore full ceremonial armor, the kind reserved for the most significant state occasions. The armor seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making him appear as a figure carved from the void itself. He climbed the 7 steps with measured dignity and settled onto the throne with the kind of presence that reminded everyone in the room exactly who held ultimate power. Lady Thessa stood at the base of the throne platform, her role as the Emperor's voice in formal proceedings, making her the conduit through which his will would be expressed. This assembly has been called to address a matter of imperial importance. Lady Thessa's voice carried through the chamber with perfect acoustics, ensuring that every word reached every listener. There has been significant discussion regarding the elevation of Mira Chen and her daughter Zara Chen toward status within the imperial household. Some have questioned the wisdom of this decision. Some have suggested that it represents a departure from tradition that threatens the stability of established order. His Radiance has called this assembly to address these concerns directly and to clarify his position beyond any possibility of misunderstanding. Emperor Kael'vros stood, and the entire assembly immediately dropped into gestures of respect. Bows, kneels, prostrations depending on species and tradition. He waited until everyone had completed their obeisance before speaking, his voice carrying the absolute authority of decades of rule. I have listened to the whispers and watched the maneuverings. I have observed as some among you have worked to undermine the position of 2 individuals who have committed no crime except to save my life and accept the protection I offered in gratitude. I have been patient, hoping that time and familiarity would ease concerns and allow for acceptance. That patience has been interpreted as weakness, so let me speak with absolute clarity. He descended the 7 steps, moving into the assembly floor itself. This was unusual enough to cause a ripple of surprise through the gathered court. Emperors did not typically leave the throne platform during formal assemblies. By doing so, Kael'vros was indicating that this was not a pronouncement from on high, but a direct engagement with his subjects. Mira Chen and Zara Chen are under my personal protection. This is not a temporary arrangement or a symbolic gesture. It is an absolute decree that will remain in effect for as long as I draw breath. Any action taken against them, any insult offered, any scheme directed toward their harm or humiliation will be treated as an act of treason against my person. He walked slowly through the chamber, his silver eyes scanning the assembled nobles and officials. 3 months ago, an attempt was made on my life. That attempt was sophisticated, well-funded, and involved infiltration at multiple levels of my household security. It should have succeeded. By every reasonable assessment, I should be dead. He stopped walking and turned to face the assembly. I am alive because a 6-year-old child noticed something that trained security professionals, advanced scanning technology, and layers of protocol missed. She noticed because she has a gift for pattern recognition, and because she possesses something that has become rare in this court, the instinct to act on compassion without calculating personal advantage. Lord Vax Terran spoke, his voice carrying the formal cadence required when addressing the Emperor in assembly. Your Radiance. No one disputes that the child performed a valuable service. The question that has been raised is whether a single act of observation, however fortunate, justifies the elevation that has been granted. We have protocols for rewarding service, a monetary payment, a minor title perhaps. But making them permanent wards of the imperial household, giving them access to the finest education and resources, placing them in proximity to state secrets and sensitive deliberations, this seems disproportionate. Does it? The Emperor's tone was dangerously quiet. Tell me, Lord Vax Terran, what would be proportionate reward for saving an Emperor's life? A comfortable retirement, perhaps. A generous pension. Recognition without responsibility. Ah, so in your view, the appropriate response to someone saving my life is to thank them, pay them off, and send them away before they can become inconvenient. He moved closer to where Lord Vax Terran stood. That is certainly efficient. It maintains existing hierarchies, prevents uncomfortable questions about merit versus birthright, and ensures that the established order remains unchallenged. Your Radiance, I seek only to protect the traditions that have kept the Empire stable for generations, and I seek to evolve those traditions so the Empire can survive the next generation. The Emperor's voice hardened. You speak of stability, but what you really mean is stagnation. You want a system where position is inherited rather than earned, where the same families hold power century after century regardless of competence or character, where innovation and ability are subordinate to bloodline and protocol. He turned to address the entire assembly. That system is dying. It may take decades or centuries, but it is dying because it cannot adapt to a galaxy that is changing faster than our traditions can accommodate. New species are joining the galactic community. Old alliances are fracturing. Technologies are emerging that render traditional power structures obsolete. If we do not evolve, we will be swept away by forces we cannot control. Admiral Koreth stepped forward, his military bearing evident in every movement. Your Radiance, with respect, change for the sake of change is not wisdom. Some traditions exist because they have proven effective over time. Disrupting those traditions without clear purpose risks creating chaos. You think my purpose is unclear. The Emperor's gaze fixed on the Admiral. Let me clarify. My purpose is to build an empire where ability is recognized and rewarded regardless of origin. Where a human child from a space station diner can grow up to serve at the highest levels if she has the talent and character to do so. Where position is earned through competence rather than inherited through accident of birth. He returned to the throne platform, but did not ascend it. Instead, he stood at its base, creating a visual that placed him between the throne and the assembly, symbolically bridging the gap between absolute authority and the governed. Some of you believe this vision is naive or dangerous. You think I am destroying the foundations of Imperial power. But I tell you that the true danger lies in refusing to change, in clinging to systems that are already failing us. The assassination attempt proved that. Someone within my own court, someone who had been vetted and trusted according to all our traditional protocols, managed to position an assassin within striking distance. Our old systems failed. A child's untrained instinct succeeded. Lady Sarath spoke up, her voice carrying artificial concern. Your Radiance? Surely you do not mean to suggest that we should replace our security systems with the random observations of children? No. I mean to suggest that we have become so dependent on technology and protocol that we have forgotten the value of human, or more broadly, sentient perception and judgment. We trust machines more than instinct, data more than observation, credentials more than character. That over-reliance nearly killed me. He finally ascended the 7 steps and settled back onto the throne. Here is what will happen. Mira Chen will be trained in household management and protocol. She will serve as an advisor on matters where the perspective of someone outside the traditional power structure is valuable. Her daughter will continue her education with the full resources of the Imperial household supporting her development. When Zara Chen reaches the age of 16, she will be given the choice of how to serve the Empire or whether to leave and pursue her own path. Until that time, they are both under my absolute protection. And if anyone here cannot accept that decision, if you find it so offensive to your sense of proper order that you cannot function within a court that includes them, then I invite you to resign your positions and retire to your estates. The door is open. Leave now if you must. But if you choose to stay, if you continue to serve in my court and benefit from the positions and privileges that service provides, then you will treat Mira Chen and Zara Chen with the respect due to anyone under Imperial protection. This is not negotiable. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. The challenge had been issued in terms so stark that there was no room for misinterpretation. Stay and accept the Emperor's decision, or leave and forfeit position and influence. Lord Vaxitaran stood motionless for several long seconds. Then, with deliberate precision, he performed a formal bow that indicated acceptance of Imperial will. He did not speak, did not offer any statement of support or agreement, but the bow itself was acknowledgement that he would not openly rebel, at least not today. One by one, the other nobles and officials followed suit, performing their own gestures of acceptance. Some did so quickly, eager to demonstrate loyalty. Others took longer, the delay itself a subtle form of protest. But all of them eventually capitulated because the alternative was to abandon everything they had spent their lives building. Mira felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. This was victory, but it was also terrifying. The Emperor had just forced his entire court to accept her and Zara, but forced acceptance was not the same as genuine respect or safety. Many of these people would now hate them even more, resentful of being compelled to tolerate what they viewed as an insult to tradition. The assembly was dismissed with formal ritual. As people began filing out, Mira noticed the looks directed at her and Zara. Some were curious, some were calculating, a few were openly hostile. But all of them now understood that moving against the Chen family meant confronting the Emperor directly, and apparently, no one was quite ready for that level of conflict. After most of the court had departed, the Emperor descended from the throne platform and approached where Mira and Zara still stood, Kira remaining a protective presence behind them. That was necessary, but not pleasant. His voice was quieter now, the public authority replaced by something more personal. I have made enemies today. Enemies I will have to manage carefully for years to come. But I could not allow the attacks on you to continue without response. Your radiance, I do not know what to say. Mira's voice was thick with emotion. You have risked so much for us. I have risked nothing that I was not already risking by trying to change how the Empire functions. You and your daughter have simply become the focal point for conflicts that would have erupted regardless. Better to bring them into the open where they can be addressed, rather than allowing them to fester in shadows. He knelt down to Zara's level, a gesture that would have shocked anyone still present to witness it. How are you doing, young one? That was probably frightening to watch. Everyone was very quiet and serious. Zara's assessment was simple but accurate. Were they angry at us? Some of them were, yes, but anger can be managed and channeled. What matters is that everyone now understands that harming you is not an option they can pursue without severe consequences. Will they stop being mean now? Some of them will. Others will find more subtle ways to express their opposition. But you will learn to recognize those subtleties and respond to them. That is part of what your education is preparing you for. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere at court did indeed change. The open hostility and mockery decreased significantly. No one wanted to risk being reported for violating the Emperor's explicit decree. But the underlying resentment remained, expressed now through cold politeness and careful distance, rather than direct confrontation. Zara continued her studies with renewed focus. The incident with Vex had taught her that her observations, while accurate, could be weaponized against her if not carefully managed. Her tutors began teaching her not just to recognize patterns, but to understand when sharing those observations was helpful versus when it would cause more harm than good. Mira found herself gradually developing a role within the Imperial household that had not been explicitly defined, but emerged organically from her unique position. She became a sounding board for policies that affected ordinary people rather than just the elite. When the Emperor's advisors proposed changes to labor regulations or trade policies, someone would think to ask Mira how such changes might impact people like the kitchen staff she used to work with. Her perspective, while limited, represented a voice that was otherwise absent from high-level deliberations. It was not glamorous work. She was not making grand policy decisions or commanding fleets, but she was contributing in ways that felt meaningful, using her experience of hardship and struggle to ensure that the Empire's decisions considered more than just the interests of the wealthy and powerful. 6 months after the assembly, Lady Thessa summoned Mira to a private meeting in her offices. The space was elegant but functional, walls lined with data displays showing information from across the Empire. Lady Thessa gestured for Mira to sit in one of the comfortable chairs arranged around a low table. I wanted to give you an update on the investigation into the assassination conspiracy. We have made significant progress in identifying the network of individuals involved. She activated a holographic display showing the same kind of connection web that Mira had seen months earlier, but now much more complete. Red lines indicated confirmed relationships between conspirators. Yellow lines indicated suspected but unproven connections. The conspiracy extended further than we initially believed. It involved members of 7 noble houses, multiple military officers, and even a few individuals within the intelligence services. The goal was not simply to kill the emperor, but to trigger a succession crisis that would allow the conspirators to install a more pliable ruler. Mira studied the web, recognizing some names, but not others. Is Lord Vax's Terran involved? We cannot prove direct involvement. Lady Thessa's tone suggested frustration with that limitation. He is too careful to leave evidence of direct participation. However, several of the conspirators had financial ties to House Venteris, and it is clear that he would have benefited significantly from the conspiracy's success. We believe he was at minimum aware of the plot and chose not to intervene. So he gets away with it. For now. But he also knows that we know, and that knowledge will constrain his actions going forward. He cannot risk another attempt while we are watching him so closely. Lady Thessa collapsed the holographic display and turned her full attention to Mira. I want you to understand something. The Assembly changed the power dynamics of this court in ways that are still playing out. The Emperor forced a confrontation, yes, but he also created an opportunity. Several nobles who were quietly sympathetic to his vision of a more merit-based empire now feel emboldened to support those policies more openly. Others who were on the fence have decided that opposing the Emperor is too costly. We have momentum now, and that momentum came because of me and Zara. It came because the Emperor chose to make your situation into a referendum on his vision for the Empire. You did not ask for that burden, but you are carrying it regardless. Lady Thessa paused, then continued with unusual gentleness. I know this has been overwhelming. I know you never wanted to be a political symbol, but you are handling it with grace and competence that many born to this life never achieve. I do not feel graceful or competent. Most of the time I feel like I am barely keeping my head above water. That is what competence feels like for most people most of the time. We are all improvising, learning, adapting. The difference is that some people are better at hiding their uncertainty. As the year mark approached, Zara's education had progressed remarkably. She was now functionally fluent in 7 languages and could recognize elements of a dozen more. Her pattern recognition skills had been refined to the point where her tutors sometimes consulted her on problems they were struggling with. And perhaps most importantly, she had developed emotional resilience, the ability to withstand criticism and doubt without losing her sense of self-worth. The other children had gradually, grudgingly, begun to accept her presence. Vex, the boy who had challenged her so aggressively, had actually become something like a friend after his father forced him to apologize, and he discovered that Zara was genuinely kind rather than vindictive. They would never be close, but they had developed mutual respect. It was on the anniversary of their arrival aboard the Sovereign Dawn that Emperor Kael'Vros summoned both Mira and Zara to his private quarters. This was different from his formal study. This was his personal space, decorated with items that clearly had sentimental rather than ceremonial value. Photographs of people who must have been family, books that showed signs of being read multiple times, a viewing window that looked out on a particularly beautiful star cluster. 1 year ago, you saved my life. The Emperor spoke without the formality that usually characterized his interactions. I wanted to mark this anniversary by telling you both something I have not said publicly. That moment changed more than just the trajectory of an assassination plot. It changed me. He settled into a chair and gestured for them to sit as well. I had been ruling for more than 4 decades. I had seen countless examples of loyalty and betrayal, courage and cowardice, nobility and corruption. I thought I understood the range of how people behave, and then a 6-year-old child risked her own safety to warn me about a danger she barely understood. She did it not for reward or recognition, but simply because she saw someone in danger and wanted to help. He looked at Zara with an expression that was almost paternal. You reminded me of something I had forgotten. Most people, if given the chance, want to do good. They want to help. They want to matter. They are not primarily motivated by greed or ambition or the desire for power. Those things exist, certainly, but they are not the default human, or more broadly, sentient condition. The default is compassion. We have to be taught to override that instinct with more calculating behavior. So you are saying, I am not special. Zara's question was genuinely curious rather than disappointed. I am saying you are special precisely because you have not yet learned to be unspecial. The Emperor smiled. And my hope is that even as you gain education and sophistication, you will remember to trust that instinct for compassion. It will serve you better than any amount of strategic thinking. He turned to Mira. As for you, I want to thank you for raising a child who possesses that quality. Whatever hardships you faced, whatever struggles you endured, you did not allow them to make her bitter or cynical. That is a profound achievement. Mira felt tears spilling down her cheeks despite her efforts to maintain composure. I just wanted her to be kind. I did not know that kindness could matter on this scale. Kindness always matters. It simply matters more when combined with ability and opportunity. You have given your daughter all three. The conversation continued for another hour, moving away from heavy topics to lighter ones. The Emperor asked about Zara's favorite subjects in school, laughed at stories about her tutor's eccentricities, and offered advice on how to handle the remaining social difficulties at court. It was comfortable in a way that Mira would never have imagined possible between an emperor and two people who had been working-class nobodies a year earlier. As they were leaving, Kael'Vros called out one final thing. Zara Chen, I have a question for you. She turned back, curious. Yes, Your Radiance? When you grow up, what do you want to be? Zara thought about this seriously. I want to help people, like you do. But I do not know if I want to be an emperor. That seems very hard. It is indeed very hard, but there are many ways to help people. You do not need a throne to make a difference. Good. Because the throne looks uncomfortable. The Emperor's laugh followed them out into the corridor, genuine and unguarded in a way that courtiers almost never heard. 2 years later, Zara was 8 years old and had become a fixture at court that people no longer questioned. She attended certain council meetings when the topics were appropriate for her learning. She participated in diplomatic functions where her ability to read cultural signals was valuable, and she had begun mentoring younger children who were struggling with their own feelings of not belonging. Mira had found her own rhythm as well. She had developed a small but dedicated network of allies who shared her commitment to ensuring that Imperial policy considered the welfare of ordinary citizens. She would never be a major power player, but she had carved out a niche where her voice mattered. Lord Vax's Terran had maintained his cold distance, never openly hostile but never warm. However, something interesting had developed. On several occasions, when policies were being debated that would significantly impact working-class populations, he had privately approached Mira to ask her assessment. He never acknowledged her advice publicly, but she had noticed that his positions in council sometimes shifted after their conversations. It was a strange detente, but it was functional. He still represented traditional power and privilege. She still represented the challenge to that system. But they had found a way to coexist because the alternative was destructive for both sides. The biggest change came when Zara was 9. The Emperor announced a new program, the Imperial Scholarship Initiative. It would identify talented young people from across the Empire, regardless of social class or species, and provide them with the same quality of education available to noble children. The first class would include 50 students selected through rigorous testing that assessed ability rather than background. The announcement caused exactly the uproar expected. Conservative nobles decried it as the final destruction of traditional values. Progressive reformers celebrated it as the beginning of real social change. And everyone understood that Zara Chen was the prototype and inspiration for the entire program. Mira watched her daughter at the ceremony announcing the first scholarship recipients. Zara stood on the stage beside the Emperor, looking small but composed, as he described how one child's courage had inspired a reimagining of what the Empire could be. 50 young people from 50 different worlds stood in front of them, their lives about to change in ways they could not yet comprehend. This was the ripple effect. One moment of compassion in a space station diner had led to this. A systematic effort to identify and nurture talent wherever it existed. It would not change the empire overnight. The old power structures would resist and adapt and find ways to maintain their advantages. But something had shifted fundamentally. That evening, as Mira was putting Zara to bed in quarters that still felt too luxurious even after 3 years of living in them, her daughter asked a question that revealed how much she had matured. "Mama, do you think we did the right thing, accepting the Emperor's offer? Sometimes I think about what our life would have been like if we had stayed at the station. It would have been simpler. Simpler, yes. But would it have been better?" Mira stroked her daughter's hair, considering her answer carefully. "I think about that too. We have faced things here that we never would have encountered in our old life. Danger, politics, people who resent us. But you have also had opportunities that would have been impossible there. You are learning things, growing in ways, that could never have happened if we had stayed. So you think it was worth it? I think that is a question you will have to answer for yourself when you are older. Right now, my job is to protect you and prepare you so that when you are old enough to make your own choices, you have the tools and knowledge to choose wisely." Zara was quiet for a moment. "I am glad we are here. It is hard sometimes, but I like learning, and I like that the Emperor is trying to help people. I want to be part of that. Then that is enough for now." Mira kissed her daughter's forehead. "Sleep well, sweetie. Tomorrow we have that cultural exchange meeting with the Diluvian delegation, and you know how much they appreciate proper rest rituals." After Zara fell asleep, Mira stood at the viewport in their quarters and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Viridian Gate Station, the place where this had all begun. She wondered if the Celestial Spoon was still operating, if Chef Torvik was still terrorizing his kitchen staff, if anyone there remembered the human cook and her daughter who had vanished into Imperial protection. She wondered if they would believe the story if they heard it. That the girl who used to play under the tables and the mother who worked 16-hour shifts were now living aboard the Imperial flagship, advising on policy, educating a child to potentially help shape the future of the galaxy. It was an absurd story. It violated every expectation about how lives were supposed to progress, about what people from their background could achieve. But it had happened because one child had noticed something wrong and decided to act on compassion rather than fear. The door chimed softly. Mira turned to see Emperor Kael'Vros standing in the corridor, alone as he sometimes was late at night when the formality of court could be set aside. "May I come in?" "Of course, Your Radiance." He entered quietly, moving to stand beside her at the viewport. "We received the final intelligence report on the assassination conspiracy. Every individual involved has been identified and dealt with. The network is dismantled. That is good news. It is, and it is not. Dismantling one network does not mean there will not be others. There will always be people who believe that removing me serves their interests. That is the nature of power. Does it frighten you?" "Less than it used to." The Emperor's reflection in the viewport showed a slight smile. "Knowing that at least one person will notice the Chirac death marks gives me a certain confidence." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the stars drift past as the Sovereign Dawn maintained its course through the void. "I want to tell you something that I have not told anyone else." Kael'Vros's voice was quiet, almost meditative. "When your daughter grabbed my arm and told me not to eat, in that moment before I understood what was happening, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt seen. Not as an emperor, not as a political entity, but as a person whose life mattered to someone who had nothing to gain from my survival." He turned to face her directly. "That feeling changed something in me, made me remember why I wanted to lead in the first place. Not for power or legacy, but because I believed I could make life better for people, all people, not just the privileged few. Your daughter gave me back that sense of purpose. I do not think she understands how important she has become." "Good. I hope she never fully understands. Let her grow up believing that what she did was simply the natural response to seeing danger. Let her trust that instinct without overthinking it. Mira considered this wisdom. Do you think the changes you are making will last? After you are gone, will the Empire continue on this path, or will it revert to the old ways? That depends on what foundation we build now. If Zara and the scholarship students and all the others who represent this new vision prove themselves valuable, if they demonstrate that merit and character matter more than bloodline, then the changes might become permanent. But it will take generations, and there will be setbacks. He moved toward the door, preparing to leave. Thank you, Mira Chen, for raising a remarkable daughter, for surviving in this environment with your integrity intact, for being exactly who you are, rather than trying to become what the court expects. After he left, Mira returned to the viewport and thought about time and change and the strange paths that lives could take. 3 years ago, she had been nobody, invisible, struggling to survive. Now she was part of something larger than herself, contributing to changes that might reshape an empire. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, and she would not trade it for anything. 5 more years passed. Zara turned 14, poised on the edge between childhood and whatever came next. The scholarship program had expanded to include 500 students each year, drawn from across the Empire's territories. The first graduates were beginning to enter Imperial service in various capacities, proving that talent existed in places the traditional system had never looked. The court had evolved as well. The old guard remained influential, but their stranglehold on power had loosened. Merit had become a factor in advancement, not the only factor, but a legitimate one that could no longer be dismissed. Lord Vax's Terran had died during this period, succeeded by his daughter, who proved to be more pragmatic and less ideologically rigid than her father. She had approached Mira at the memorial service and said something surprising. My father never admitted it publicly, but he respected you. He believed you were wrong about many things, but he respected that you held to your principles even when doing so was difficult. It was not a warm endorsement, but it was acknowledgement. Sometimes that was the best that could be achieved. On Zara's 14th birthday, the Emperor held a small private celebration in his quarters. It had become something of a tradition, these quiet gatherings that included just Mira, Zara, Kira, Lady Thessa, and a few others who had become genuine friends rather than political allies. As they were finishing the meal, Calvros raised his glass in a toast. To Zara Chen, who in 2 more years will face the most important decision of her young life. Whatever path she chooses, she will do so with my gratitude and support. Zara smiled, more confident now than the frightened 6-year-old who had grabbed an emperor's arm in a space station diner. I think I already know what path I want to take, but I will wait until it is official to announce it. Smart. Keeping your options open. The Emperor's approval was evident. That is wise strategy. Actually, I just do not want to have to make the same announcement multiple times. That seems inefficient. The laughter that followed was genuine, the kind shared among people who had been through difficult times together and come out stronger for it. Later, when the celebration had ended and guests had departed, Zara found her mother alone in their quarters. She sat beside Mira on the familiar couch and leaned against her shoulder the way she had when she was small. Mama, do you remember that day at the restaurant? When I warned the Emperor? Of course. How could I forget? Do you ever wish I had not done it? That we had just stayed in our normal life? Mira thought carefully before answering. Sometimes I wish you had not been put in danger. Sometimes I wish we could have had a simpler path. But no, I do not wish you had not done it. Because that moment of courage, that instinct to help someone in need, that is who you are. Suppressing that to stay safe would have meant suppressing the best part of yourself. She pulled her daughter closer. You saved more than just the Emperor's life that day. You saved my faith that good things can happen to people like us. You showed me that one person, even a small person, can change the course of events. That is a gift I will always be grateful for. Zara was quiet for a moment. I want to work in the intelligence services, cultural analysis and pattern recognition. I want to help identify threats before they can hurt people. Is that okay? It is more than okay. It is perfect. You will be amazing at it. I am a little scared. Being scared is healthy. It means you understand the stakes. Just do not let fear stop you from doing what you know is right. They sat together in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, two people who had traveled an impossible distance from where they started. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance. Inside, two hearts beat with purpose and hope. The galaxy was vast and complex and often unkind. But somewhere in that vastness, there was room for a girl who had once played under restaurant tables, and her mother who had once thought surviving the week was the highest achievement she could aim for. They had not just survived. They had transformed their world and been transformed by it. And the story that had begun with Chirac death marks on a bowl in a space station diner was still being written. One choice. One act of courage, one moment of compassion at a time. The Empire would continue to evolve. Power structures would shift. New challenges would emerge. But whatever came next, Mira and Zara Chen would face it together, armed with love, education, and the unshakable knowledge that they belonged exactly where they were. Because belonging was not about bloodline or birthright. It was about character and courage and the willingness to act when action was required. It was about noticing the small details that others missed and caring enough to do something about them. It was about being human in the best sense of that word, regardless of what species you actually were. And in the end, that was the most revolutionary idea of all.